Hey there, welcome to another Racing from Home. We've got plenty to talk about this weekend with the split divisions of the Arkansas Derby getting so much attention. Bob Baffert sweeping each division. So, Mr. Bailey, let's start off with chronologically, of course, with the first division. Charlatan, a 6-length winner of the first division, wire to wire. What were your thoughts on the way the race was run in general, and specifically your opinions of Charlatan now coming out of the Arkansas Derby?
All right. Well, as usual, you and I pretty much agreed how the race would be run. Charlatan really was the only controlling speed in the race. That's how he runs anyway, and that's how it unfolded. He controlled the pace. He didn't have to go very slow, and he didn't. I mean, he's got a high cruising speed, and it's probably wise that his jockey Martin Garcia used it. And it was never an issue. He busted out of the gate quickly. Martin used his speed. Bob Baffert, his trainer, said he wanted him to do that, and he was never threatened. Now, who else was in the race? Probably wasn't the stiffest competition that we could find. The other half of the Arkansas Derby was stronger, I thought. But it was still a very professional race. My only qualm, and this is splitting hairs, and this is a horse that's only run 3 times, obviously. I mean, look at, I wasn't a big fan of Justify after he won the Santa Anita Derby. I thought maybe it wasn't all that good, and it turned out to be really good. But my fear for Charlatan is that the way he seems to run, at least up to now, is that when there's other speed in the race, I am not convinced that he will rate and relax off other horses. Now, we didn't really get a chance to see it Saturday because he had the inside post. He was meant on making the lead, which he did. But just the way he runs, I'd have to see more convincing types of running from him to make me convinced that he could sit off of an early fast pace at 1.25 miles.
Yeah, I mean, we don't necessarily want to knock Charlatan. When you look at his past performances, I mean, my gosh, he starts off with a 5 3/4 length maiden win. Then he wins an allowance at Santa Anita by 10 1/4. And then, of course, the Arkansas Derby by 6. I mean, it's our job, I guess, to be contrarians at times. And me especially, right? Okay. And this, I mean, I might be wrong. I might be totally wrong, but it's an opinion, and that's what we're here for, is to give opinions. So first of all, the Arkansas Derby itself, visually, obviously very impressive. And when he runs off like a wild horse through the lane, he wins by 6, wow. Combined with his other 2 races, wow. But then, as you point out, you look at the horses behind him, the 2nd and 3rd place finishers, Basin and Gouverneur Morris, are not really at this point, in my opinion, A-list 3-year-olds. Maybe Gouverneur Morris will develop into one later in the year, but right now it's sort of like he's underachieving. And, as a whole, that's what we expected. I mean, Charlatan went into that race with a huge advantage in talent. He went into the race with the other potential speed challenger, Shoot or Shoot, scratched. Mm-hmm. And so we figured that he was going to get a beautiful pace setup, and therefore we figured that Charlatan would probably win convincingly. That's why he was the 1-5 favorite. And he did win convincingly. It's splitting hairs, but I thought from a figure perspective, his race could have been faster. He was under urging. It wasn't like he came to the wire under a double Nelson. So my contrarian opinion here is that when all the smoke settles at the end of the season and maybe next year, that Charlatan is going to wind up being an absolutely brilliant miler / sprinter, which is fantastic in the breeding industry. Nothing wrong with that. And that I am skeptical of his ability to win the Kentucky Derby at 1.25 miles unless he is given the same sort of pace scenario as he got in the Arkansas Derby. And I don't think that's likely to happen in the Kentucky Derby. But even if he did, I mean, give me your opinion on this before we get into Nadal. If those 2 horses had run against each other, Charlatan and Nadal, this past Saturday at Oaklawn, my opinion, we see Charlatan go to the lead. We see Nadal rate just behind him. And I think Nadal runs him down.
I'm not sure. I think it would be very close. Now, I want to leave the door open a little bit for Charlaton's future and how he runs for this point. Bob Baffert can do really good things with horses, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. He did it with a doll. So maybe if he's trained to relax off other horses, and maybe if Bob used this as a stepping stone that Charlatan needs to improve and will improve, this was just a means to an end, he'll get there, then maybe I'm wrong, and maybe he will rate enough and relax off other horses early enough. But just my gut feeling from watching this is that'll be more of a challenge to him than his stablemate Nadal.
Yeah, and I suppose my skepticism about Charlatan at 1.25 miles is probably borne out from 3 different things. First of all, his running style, right? Very, very fast. We haven't seen him rate yet, to your point. Maybe he will. Secondly, I guess there's really 2 things. Secondly would be his pedigree. Well, 3 things. His pedigree. He's by Speightstown, who was champion sprinter. Now, Speightstown as a stallion, as a sire, has sired horses that can go a distance of ground, but you don't necessarily think of Speightstown as a distance influence, as a 1.25 miles type influence. Female side of the pedigree is out of a mare named Authenticity, who could get a distance without a problem. So maybe Charlatan will get more from the female side than he does from the male side. But being a son of Speightstown, to me, doesn't necessarily mark him down as a 1.25 mile horse in your mind. And then thirdly, the declining speed figure from the 1 mile race at Santa Anita into Oakland at 1 1/8 miles makes you wonder what happens next when he goes 1.25 miles. So again, I may be totally wrong.
Oh, good points. Good points.
Yeah, I mean, it's our opinion to give opinions. It's our job to give opinions. So maybe I'll have egg on my face by the time this is all over with. Now, you mentioned what Baffert does in training these horses. Let's now get to the second division of the Arkansas Derby and Nadal, where I don't know if it's training, but Bob certainly trained Nadal to sit behind horses in the mornings prior to the Arkansas Derby. And the way that race was run, you tell us about it. Maybe it paid off.
Yeah, I mean, you and I chat all the time. We go back and forth, and hey, did you see this? Did you see that? And you pointed out a day or 2 before I got to it that Bob Baffert had been training Nadal to work behind other horses, not necessarily right in behind, but a few lengths farther back as he started to work and finish really well going to the wire. And that's exactly how the race came up. Wells Bayou on the outside, a speed horse, figured to be a speed horse, won the Louisiana Derby on the lead, was on the lead in the Southwest when he ran at Oakland. He caught a flyer leaving the gate. I mean, he was a length in front by the time he hit the ground the second time. And so he quickly dropped over, and Joel Rosario, the jockey on Nadal, sensed that, looked out, and did the right thing. After he kissed to him a little bit, I call it kiss to him, leaving the gate and urged him just slightly, then he decided, let me just wait just a second. He allowed Wells Bayou to clear him, and then he put Nadal right outside, and he stalked him until the time was right. And to me, that was very impressive. I think we've talked about this at length, that very similar to American Pharoah in his Arkansas Derby win in 2015, rating just relaxing slightly off the lead horse, first time he had done it, going on and winning, and that proved to be very effective and very helpful to him, as he did pretty much the same thing in the Kentucky Derby 3 weeks later back in 2015. Very professional race by Nadal. I mean, the ultimate professional type of race, being urged out of the gate the first or second jump, and then allowing the rider to ease him back off again. And not all horses can do that. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think Charlatan could have done that after being urged early leaving the gate. But Nadal, maybe it's his mind, I don't know, but he's very, very sensitive to what the rider wants him to do. And he just said, okay, if you want me to sit, I'll sit. And I'll go when you ask me to go. And boy, did he when he turned for home.
Yeah, his running time, 1:48.34, was 0.15 of a second faster than Charlatan ran in the first division. And I personally thought Nadal made improvement from his Rebel Stakes, which was very impressive in itself. In the Rebel, if we recall, he was dueling for the lead in very hot fractions for Oakland Park at 1 1/16 miles. And yet he kept going and he kept putting away one challenger after another. Even at the end, when Accession ran to him, Nadal had plenty left to put Accession away. But picking up weight for the Arkansas Derby, now sitting off the pace for the first time, being in the two path instead of being on the rail like he was in the Rebel. I mean, all these things could have added up to a slightly slower race in the Arkansas Derby, and instead his number went up, his number went the other direction. So, I mean, I was very impressed with Nadal. And one thing that I think people should realize, and give me your opinion on this, because of his natural speed, he was right there, sort of lapped on Wells Bayou. He didn't let Wells Bayou get away. Rosario wasn't going to do that. But it gives me encouragement that if the situation calls for it, Nadal might have the temperament to sit back even a little further, to sit back 2 or 3 lengths off the pace, to maybe be third, like American Pharoah was, third or fourth in the Kentucky Derby, and still manage, despite a wide trip, to win. Maybe Nadal has that sort of tactical flexibility.
Yeah, you know, for a rider riding him, he's got so many tools that makes your job easier in a crowded field like the Kentucky Derby always is. He's got good enough gate speed. His first, second, third time hitting the ground, he's quick enough not to get pinched out. He's at least holds his own, and most of the time he's ahead in front. He's big and tough. You pointed out yourself. He weighs 1,300 pounds, so he can take some knocking around that almost always happens in the Kentucky Derby. And he's got multiple moves. You know, quick out of the gate, then settles, and then creeps up down the backside if you need him to, and then he'll settle and wait for a third call. He might do that 3 or 4 times. And when a horse can give a rider those options, rateable speed and multiple moves, God, and that much talent, they're hard to beat.
So even though we're now first Saturday in May and the Derby is in the first Saturday in September now, I mean, Bob Baffert certainly looks like he's completely loaded. I mean, we're looking at Nadal, who right now lifetime is 4 for 4. Charlatan lifetime is 3 for 3. And I don't want to say if it's sitting on the bench, but
Authentic.
He's also got Authentic sitting in the background, who is also 3 for 3. They've got this system going right now that really just started this year. SF Racing, which is the Soros fund of George Soros, has sort of a racing and breeding wing, SF Bloodstock, SF Racing. It's headed up by a couple of guys named Gavin Murphy and Tom Ryan. Ryan, an Irishman who lives in Kentucky. Gavin Murphy runs the tax stuff for George Soros in New York. And they've created this Bloodstock Racing division. And they brought in Starlight Racing with Jack Wolf as the managing partner. And so this past year, they decided after Justify that this could really work, and they teamed up and went to yearling sales. So you had Ryan looking at yearlings. You had Donato Lanni, who's a noted bloodstock guy. Henry Field from Australia, who's done a great job with Newgate Farm, turning them into a powerhouse in Australia. Frankie Brothers, from obviously our colleague Donna Brothers' husband, who's a big-time trainer in his own right. He goes to look at the horses. Baffert then comes in and looks at the horses, and they pick out these yearlings. They brought in, as always, Saul Cumin as a partner, and 3 other guys this year with the 3-year-olds. Fred Portrich, who is the Breeders' Cup CEO right now, the chairman. A young guy named Ben Goldberg, a diamond jeweler in Manhattan who just got into the business 4 years ago, who operates under Golconda Stable. And then the third guy is a marketing entrepreneur from Canada, from Toronto, named John Fielding. And then Barbara Banke of Stone Street bought into Charlatan since she bred Charlatan. So you got all these owners now with the same ownership, basically, that has Charlatan, right? That has Authentic, and also has 8 rings. And then they've got a whole stable of 2-year-olds that they bought as well. This is round 2. Bob calls it similar to COVID. He said this is the second wave coming up now. And so they've got all these horses now, about 15 2-year-olds that are in the wings. And Bob said that these horses look pretty promising and pretty talented as well. So what we're seeing right now with the Baffert Empire, as deep as it is, may be something that we better get accustomed to, right?
I retired too soon.
All right, so if you right now had to pick first Saturday in May, your top 5, let's say, for the Kentucky Derby, who would it be? And I think we're going to be very similar on this because we always are.
I'm still going to hold Tiz the Law at number 1. He's just so built for the distance. Nadal is right there close at number 2. Charlatan would be, he'd be in the top 5. I don't know if he'd be 3 or not. Authentic would be in there as well. AP Honor, I really like this colt, and since the Derby is in September, he's only run, I think, 2 or 3 times. He was second to Authentic in the San Felipe, I believe. That's my group right there. But I'm just going to give Tiz the Law a slight nod. But I'm going to tell you right now, this is like looking at an NFL team in September, okay? And they all look healthy and they all look great. And then by the time you get 3/4 of the way through the season, or game 12 or 14, they might look a little different because these equine athletes have to stay healthy all the way through. And then it's not a given that they do. So I don't care how well they're managed. You know, horses can be like strawberries, as they say, and they can go bad overnight. But at this point, that would be my 5.
I knew we would have the same number 1. To me, Tiz the Law is. I would say, in my mind, right now, if the Derby were run, say, in 3 weeks, I think he would be a solid number 1 for me. I love the way he looked in the Florida Derby. Nadal would be number 2. Okay, I'll give you another one here. Right now, because the Derby is run this year, the first Saturday in September, I'm going to put Maxfield.
I forgot about it. Yeah, good.
I loved his race, obviously, in the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland last year, and then he got injured before the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and we didn't get to see him. Had some bone chips taken out, and so now he's supposed to run in the Matt Winn at Churchill Downs for his comeback race, 1 1/16 in June. So he should be set to run.
And he's won at Churchill Downs.
He broke his maiden at Churchill Downs.
Right.
So if we assume that the Belmont Stakes is going to be run in late June, we'll see if Cuomo allows racing to get started again at Belmont Park. But Maxfield could run in the Matt Winn and then maybe segue to the 1 1/8 Belmont Stakes, 3rd or 4th Saturday in June. And then after Maxfield, I think I would put Charlatan 4th, Authentic 5th, and I'd probably have Honor AP just right there in 6th on the fringe. But that would be mine anyway.
All right.
Okay, then we got the Kentucky Oaks to deal with. We've got some very top quality 3-year-old fillies that we saw run at Oaklawn, not just in the Fantasy Stakes on Friday, the day before the Arkansas Derbies, but also in an allowance race has gotten a lot of attention on Saturday. But let's start with the Fantasy Stakes on Friday. A sensational performance for the winner, Swiss Skydiver, and also an outstanding performance by the runner-up, Venetian Harbor. What were your thoughts on that one?
Okay, so Venetian Harbor was a California filly, just came off a stakes win out there in the Las Virgenes, maybe, was it? I can't remember exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, she had only been beaten once, I believe. Plenty of speed, maybe undefeated. She was beaten by Swiss Skydiver, who had won the Gulfstream Oaks, and I think was 2nd or 3rd in the Fairgrounds Oaks before that. 2 talented fillies, and they drew away from the field. It was just those 2. They pretty much defined themselves against the other fillies. No excuses for either filly I didn't see. Venetian Harbor, yeah. She broke well. She got a clear lead. That's how she runs. She seemed to be comfortable. And Swiss Skydiver just ran her down, which leads me to believe I would choose her over Venetian Harbor, go at a 1 1/8 on the Churchill Downs strip. That's not necessarily a very speed favorite.
So Swiss Skydiver ran what was the race of her life in the Gulfstream Park Oaks. She wins that race by 3 1/4 lengths, coming off a well-beaten 3rd in the Rachel Alexander at the Fairgrounds. But the reason why Swiss Skydiver was 16-1 in the fantasy, despite having won the Gulfstream Oaks, is that at Gulfstream, she got away with a remarkably easy pace on the front end, 24-1, 49 seconds for the half mile. And she controlled the pace in very slow fractions. And since that was by far the best race of her career, and since Venetian Harbor was definitely going to set the pace in the fantasy, the wise guy thinking was, well, then obviously Swiss Skydiver is not going to get that trip again, and she's not going to be as good. So what does Swiss Skydiver do? She sits just off of Venetian Harbor. I say just off, 2 or 3 lengths off. Engaged her at the top of the stretch. It was a tremendous duel till about the 16th pole, and then Swiss Skydiver edges away and wins and goes 1 mile and a 16th in 142.00. Now, 2 things to mention about that. First of all, on Friday at Oaklawn, the racetrack was very speed favoring. Not necessarily speed and rail favoring, although when you're a speed horse, typically you're on the rail, but very, very strongly biased, I thought, toward early speed. So that probably helped both of these fillies. But secondly, the overall speed of the racetrack was about the same Friday at Oaklawn as it was Saturday for the Arkansas Derby. And so speed figure wise, at 1 mile and a 16th compared to 1 mile and an 1/8 for Nadal and Charlatan, this race that Swiss Skydiver ran actually comes up on the numbers as almost identical to Nadal, maybe even a touch faster. She gets a 99 by her speed figure off that fantasy, 10 lengths back to the 3rd place finisher, who was a pretty decent horse. She dares the devil in her own right, compared to 98 for Nadal the next day in the Arkansas Derby. So speed favoring though the track was, these 2 fillies ran a hole in the wind. They ran really, really well.
So who would you pick going forward to the Oaks?
Out of those 2, it would have to be Swiss Skydiver. And here's another reason why. Well, first of all, I'm a little more skeptical, obviously, of Venetian Harbor at 1 mile and an 1/8 than I would be at 1 mile and a 16th. She's probably going to be best also as a miler sort. But there should be some other speed in the Kentucky Oaks if all these horses get that far as well. Because what we saw Saturday in an allowance race earlier on the card, the 7th race, 1 mile and a 16th allowance for 3-year-old fillies, was a $1.8 million filly who had gotten rave reviews in training at Santa Anita, made her 2nd lifetime start by the name of Gamine, trained, of course, by Bob Baffert. Now, you went back and watched Gamine's race. If you didn't see it live, were you impressed?
I was, but not as much as you are. I know you talked to Bob and you said, what kind of filly is this? And he said she could be a superstar, and maybe she is. But she was life and death to hold off Speech at the wire, and it didn't. And I know it's only her 2nd start, so I'm going to give her a credit there, going from a sprint race into this. But it didn't scream to me longer. But again, 2nd race, as she develops through the summer, she doesn't have to run the Oaks, Kentucky Oaks, until September, so she can certainly have enough time to develop. But I know they ran fast, but I think you were more impressed than I was.
They ran very fast, 141.91, and
both of them did though. Both of them did because they hit the wire together.
Exactly. Now, visually, although it looked like she was life and death to win, because Speech was gaining on her. Keep this in mind. They went the last quarter in that race in about 20. Either the timing mechanism, which is Equibase GPS, was a little bit funky in that race, but it was for Gamine. It was either 24-3 or 24-4 for the final quarter mile in that race. After setting what was, I wouldn't say a fast early pace, but it was a decent early pace, and still managed to finish that fast. When Charlatan finished in 26 for the final quarter mile, going 1 mile and an 1/8 after setting a faster pace, and Nadal ran the fastest final quarter mile of his division of the Arkansas Derby, and it was in the high 25s, 25.9 something. Okay, so even though Gamine was life and death to hold on to win, she was running her ass off the last quarter of a mile. The 5th place horse in that race, who was a decent horse named Ain't No Elmers, and then there were some other horses behind them who had some okay form. But the fifth place horse in there was beaten 21 lengths and was kind of in contention coming to the top of the stretch. And those two just ran away from her. Now, Andy Beyer is skeptical, as he wrote, primarily because of speech.
That was going to be my next question to you. How good do you think speech is?
I mean, speech ran the race of her life as well, and she comes out of that with a 97 Beyer speed figure. But she had a beautiful rail trip all the way around, right? She sat in the pocket. She sat in the catbird seat. She followed Gamine through to the top of the stretch, swung out around her. So she had a beautiful trip. She was also carrying only 116 pounds. So you drop her fig by 3 points or so when she gets up to the 122, 123 pound range. And suddenly, if she doesn't have a rail trip, you factor those two in, and a 97 for speech in that allowance race suddenly becomes, say, a 94 because of weight, and then a 91 or a 90 because of trip. And then the 97 becomes much more reasonable than you would think, just looking at it on face value. But a very fast race. And Gamine obviously has a lot of speed, as does Venetian Harbor, probably not as much as Venetian Harbor. But I do share your concerns about Gamine for the Kentucky Oaks. Assuming Venetian Harbor runs in the Kentucky Oaks, she's probably almost certainly going to set the pace. She ran faster fractions than Gamine, and we haven't seen yet if Gamine is going to be able to rate, just like Charlotte.
Look, this is just conjecture on our part. So much can change. It's not like we're sitting on we're talking about the next race they run 3 weeks from now. This is light years away. This is September. And for horses of this age, the way they can develop or regress, we're talking centuries almost away. We'll see how they develop. You got to give her a chance. Maybe she gets better. Maybe this is as good as she is, talking about Gamine. If she gets better, obviously she is probably the horse to beat, but she's also needs to learn how to relax a little bit because, as you say, there's always speed. And we already see one of them right now, Venetian Harbor. So a lot needs to be played out, but she's worth watching. Yeah, this is only her second race, shipping, stretching out for the first time. My biggest question is how good do you think speech is?
Yeah,
because they will not run together for a while, I don't think. Speech will stay on the East Coast. Gamine will probably stay on the West Coast. And we'll see. We'll track their careers.
Just so people know, on the texting Bob Baffert front after that race, if this were just an ordinary allowance race for say 3-year-olds and up, and the race comes up a 98 speed figure, give them a 98 speed figure, no problem. And I was very confident when I looked at the entire day as a whole that Gamine ran a 98 speed figure, but I knew that because this was a 3-year-old filly, and because she was on the same card as Charlatan and Nadal and was going to get a fig equal to those, if not better, then I knew that there was going to be a whole lot of eyeballs on it. There was going to be some skepticism. So I thought, all right, I'll try to cover all my bases and make other people feel better about this number. So I texted Bob and said, how good is Gamine? And his response was superstar. I texted Mike McCarthy, the trainer of speech, how good is speech? And Mike responded, she's a very hard trying filly, always tries her heart out. Bob's filly, Gamine, came with quite the reputation. I told him about the numbers, and this is kind of funny, but I mean, he came back and said, I think the number is legitimate. Now, as I pointed out to Andy Beyer, asking a trainer if his horse is capable of running a fast number is sort of like asking a mother if her child is intelligent. Right? You're always going to get the affirmative answer. Oh, I think the horse deserves a big number. But that's why I texted those guys and called the track superintendent to find out if anything was done differently before that 7th race or any other race during the day on Saturday from a track maintenance standpoint. No, there wasn't. And retime the race twice to make sure that 141.91 was actually accurate. So
let me clean this up a little bit. I was mistaken. Speech will go back to the West Coast as well. So you're going to see these two fillies run against each other again. And this will be interesting to see, how far apart they stay or how close they stay, whichever way you want to look at it. So it'll be an interesting summer. Assume we get back to racing.
We've been zooming right along here. We've had a pretty long Zoom session here. So I guess we better wrap it up before we bore people.
All right.
Anything else you want to say?
No, I was glad we had Arkansas. I mean, Oaklawn did the industry a big service, and I was glad that they had the races they did because it gave us something to look forward to, an otherwise void moment in our industry. So the first Saturday in May, although it wasn't Churchill Downs, it was quite interesting.
Unbelievable card on Saturday. Kudos to Oaklawn. There were allowance races that could have been stakes races at any other track. $41 million in handle, more than doubled their previous all-time record. Applause all the way around for the Oaklawn people. They really helped the industry a lot. And now going forward, Churchill starts up, and maybe we'll get Belmont going and get Santa Anita back going, and then we can have some semblance of normalcy back in these weird times as we continue through the year in horse racing. And we'll be back soon with another Racing from Home. So, Jerry,
All right.
stay safe.
Everybody out there, thanks for watching, and practice social distancing and wear your mask if you need to. See ya.
Take care.